Hello and welcome to our game on a lovely Monday morning. Shane Stapleton with a smile on his face, which surprises me somewhat. But delighted to be with you all. Obviously, our game brought to you this morning by orgaretro.com. Get these beautiful jerseys. Use the promo code OurGame to get 15% off on orgaretro.com. That Tipperary jersey that will be potentially out of use for the rest of the summer for the hurlers. This Offaly jersey, which will not be. Shane, you have a smile on your face this morning, but I sense a little bit deeper down, maybe not too happy over how things have transpired for Tipp over the last 3 to 4 weeks, and maybe over the last couple of years even.
Yeah, it's more of a grimace than a smile, I have to be honest, because like this notion that the 231-23 point defeat to Limerick was, great performance and all that, and it's more frustration because Tipperary should not be in a situation where you're losing 3 games out of 3, one performance absolutely terrible, falling away and not having the panel depth to keep it with Limerick towards the end of the game, in a situation where the belief in the team is so little that, very few people are showing up for the game. So it's more a case of the last couple of years where this team has been allowed to go in terms of like what was thrown out there against, a really seasoned Limerick team that are looking to win 4 All-Irelands in 5 years. And they are a brilliant team. There's no two ways about it. But that Tipperary would be going out with so many players who have so little game time, and that, you'd be in this situation where people are talking beforehand. And even myself, you're looking at the 2012 All-Ireland semi-final defeat to Kilkenny by 18 points and thinking, could this actually be worse? But belief was that low in the team. So on the flip side, you would be at least looking at it from a Tipperary. If I put on the Tipperary supporter hat for once,
do you ever take it off?
Yeah, you'd at least be saying, okay, great to see a performance there, but frustration at how this actually could be if all these lads had to get game time in the last couple of years, which I was saying throughout 2020 and 2021. How often was I pulling my hair out over, the issue that is now coming to pass, and the chickens are coming home to roost.
So this is, in your opinion, so Tipp won the All-Ireland in 2019 with a lot of those elder statesmen still driving it. And, that maybe a lot of different guys, the likes of Craig Morgan, would say the likes of Paddy Cadell, the likes of Mark Keogh, and probably a couple more that I'm leaving off there, even Jake Morris, that they should have been played an awful lot more last year and in 2020, various leagues and championship games, so that they're not just like, there's an idea of blooding them now, whereas they probably should be blooded.
Yeah, I mean, this was the thing. In 2019, some of these players were getting game time. You were seeing, obviously, Jake Morris got plenty of game time and has done ever since. He's the one player of that 2018, 2019 underage groups that consistently got game time. But after that, Mark Keogh got a little taste here and there, and so too did Paddy Cadell. He got 1 or 2 tastes. But in general, I mean, you look at the amount of players that should have gotten game time. I know I talk about Paddy Cadell a lot, and again, I just found it so frustrating to see a lad being taken off just before half-time. I mean, talk about giving a player a shot across the bows in terms of confidence. That's not ideal. Craig Morgan should have seen far more game time. Dylan Quirk, I know he had a heart issue for a while, so he missed out on a year. And he was actually corner forward, scored 4 points from play against Watford in the league game at the start of 2020. Would like to see more of him. Jared Brown obviously had his club issues, so that plays a part there. But Conor Bowe, I think in the under-20 championship, his last 2 seasons, he was man of the match in 5 out of the 8 games, and yet he goes off and plays football for a season. Now, that maybe stood to him in a physical sense, but, surely there was some use for him last year when Tipperary were struggling. Robert Byrne would be another, and so on and so forth. So I just find that very frustrating, that all of a sudden they're thrown in as lambs to the slaughter in a way. And, in many ways, people are talking about, geez, it's great that the Tipperary did so well, despite having all those players out. But, in many ways, and we talked about it last week, I'll just bring it up on the screen here. This is, some of the players that were missing last week. Some had obviously retired and all that. But I think it's because a lot of these players were missing that these lads were finally thrown out in the field. You need that energy. If you're going to compete with somebody like Limerick, you need that energy. Now, the flip side is, if some of these players were available to be brought off the bench, maybe that would have allowed Tipperary to stay in the game beyond the 64th, 65th minute, was level at that stage, from which point Limerick brilliantly took over, saw the game out, unloaded the bench. So that's my frustration with Tipperary. Now, and the thing is, I did say it while it was happening, so it's not like I'm being wise after the event. And you do know that.
Yeah, no, you've been saying it consistently, to be fair. It's very strange that, having these injuries, how is it taken like setbacks almost for Tipperary to fall on their best 15? It's a kind of a strange one.
Yeah, I mean, look, you were there. Did you expect going into the game and even just the mood there that this was going to be a beatdown?
Uh, when I looked at the personnel, I was kind of thinking, Jesus, they could actually match up pretty well here. But then you're taking into account how low morale presumed was within the camp. Now, the performance yesterday would totally defy that, and it was kind of a defiant performance by a Tipperary side who had showed absolutely nothing against Clare. You thought a lot of guys kind of stood up yesterday, an awful lot of energy yesterday. Like you mentioned, even Ger Brown, just finding pockets of space. Like, he caused Dermot Burns a lot of trouble in that first half in particular. A lot of trouble. Just he brought him in. He brought him to areas that he didn't want to go, and as a result of that, he was left. He's left free. I think he took 5 shots in the first half, 3 points. He could have easily had 5 points from play. I thought Tipp's game plan against Burns was actually really good. They loaded that wing a lot of the time, even when they didn't have the ball. So the out ball of Burns standing on his right hand side, nearly to put a ball over the bar, they didn't really have that. Whereas they left the other wing free a lot of the time, and Dan Morrissey was in space, but Dan Morrissey's not going to hurt you from 100 yards like Dermot Burns in. So I thought that was pretty smart. It was just, I know they got 4 goals in their first 2 games. It was just the inability just to take those chances when they arose yesterday. Probably, all told, probably 4 goal chances. Definitely 2 to 3 really good chances. Say Limerick had 4 chances, took 3. Tipp had 4 or 5 and took 0. And that was the difference, really. Just that little kind of clinical edge in front of goal.
Yeah, you might tell me a little bit more about what Limerick did really well throughout this game, because obviously there was 2 sides playing and Limerick actually won. But Joe Butler, first off, he says a very good effort from Tipperary, but when the juggernaut started to motor properly after the Barry Nash point around the 50th minute, there was only one winner. Actually, just to even dwell on that particular score, did you see the way he worked the ball out and he just kept doing the overlap run? Darragh O'Donovan took a serious dunt. I thought there was definitely a free for him there and probably a yellow card for whoever did it. Might have been Dylan Quirk.
Oh, that was a concussion written all over it. It was a really heavy hit.
Yeah. And then I think the ball, I'm not sure who the ball went on to next, but Barry Nash kept going, knocked the ball over the bar. And the thing that I found interesting is, as it panned to him when he was running back to his own half, he just looked like this was the first run he'd made in the entire game. He was so fresh. And at the other end of the field, I looked at the Tipperary players, when it zoomed in on them, when they'd done their latest defensive effort or whatever, the players looked out on their feet, especially in that last 15 minutes. So what did Limerick do so well?
Well, I tell you what, they didn't panic anyway when things were going against them. This had a lot of, and I know Eddie Brennan wrote it in the paper this morning, had a lot of the 2019 All-Ireland semi-final about it. There was a lot of things, going wrong for Limerick. Like, there was a passage of play before half-time. I actually couldn't believe it. There was a double hook on Tom Morrissey, which is obviously great defending from Tipperary, but also, a player of his awareness would never normally get hooked twice in the one play. The ball ended up with his brother Dan standing by himself on the sideline, and he threw up the ball and just nearly completely missed it. Do you remember that one? He just completely skewed it, and then the ball ended up with Darragh O'Donovan, and he dropped the hurl. And ended up fouling the ball, I think. And it was just, a couple of things that you would just never see happen with Limerick. With O'Donoghue going through twice in the first half, didn't settle on the strike at all, 2 bad wides. No, Tipperary actually had more wides than Limerick, but Limerick did look a bit kind of rattled. I don't know, we're not going to find out. But Tipperary or Limerick looked very leggy, I thought. They looked like a league performance from Limerick when potentially they were going through a load of training or something. I'm not saying that they were training heavily in the build-up to this game. I'd be very surprised if they were. But they looked very leggy. From a Limerick point of view, the most heartening thing is that they played, there was a mixture of Limerick being off and Tipperary being on. But Limerick's ability to turn things around mid-game when things are going badly, very few teams can do that. If you're not on, normally you're not on. They were able to turn it around. And as Joe says there, it was 115 to 20 points for Noah McGrath over a 65. Then 2 big Dermot Burns place balls, and then Declan Hannon comes up and gets a point. David Reedy gets a score. Gillane gets a free. Conor Boylan gets a goal. What's that? 2-5 without a response. And the game is over. This match-winning burst, the same burst that they had against Waterford, the same burst that they had against Cork. But just that ability, I suppose, to hang in there and persevere when things aren't going particularly well. That's probably a real sign of champions. But they'd be really disappointed with that performance yesterday, all told. There was a lot of uncharacteristic mistakes in it. And just something you mentioned earlier, there was 27,111 in the Gaelic grounds yesterday. And it cannot be understated. When their team was under pressure, the Limerick fans, probably about the guts of about 25,000, were really, really getting behind them. And, I don't even know if there was 2,000 Tipperary people there, genuinely. Just a really small crowd. I know Paddy Maher said it. I think he said this current team deserves better. And there was a very small Tip crowd in Thurles as well. And just when your team needs you, I would say, I don't know if the Tipperary support let down their team, but it definitely helps a team just to have that noise behind you. Even when Tipperary were going well yesterday, there was no noise. It was on-field kind of noise. And it was Colin Bonner, in fairness, hurled every ball on the sideline. I'd say there was beads of sweat going all over his body yesterday. He was just, he was real kind of fired up and devastated after. But from a Limerick point of view, just getting the job done when you're not playing particularly well, that's probably the biggest plus for them.
Yeah, look, I said this to you last year after the Munster final, when Limerick began making these really uncharacteristic mistakes during the game, like mishitting the ball, just spilling the ball, not always under pressure. Obviously, there was the Tipperary pressure in that Munster final last year. But again, it happened here, and you kind of mentioned a couple of them. And just to refresh on that, Darragh O'Donovan at one stage trying to do the switch hand pass, and he drops the hurley on the ground. Sean Finn coming out with the ball, throwing it up and catching it. Will O'Donoghue mishitting a couple of balls. Dan Morrissey mishitting balls. Players just, I don't know, they look like their feathers were ruffled. And when Shane Dowling was talking last night in the Sunday game, he said that it's great to win when you're not playing well. I mean, is the reason that Limerick didn't play well because of Limerick, or is it simply the case that this Tipperary team, they're not able for them for 70 minutes? But in terms of going toe-to-toe, Tipperary are able to rattle them enough in both games that we've seen so that Limerick's skill set breaks down a little bit. Because I think, like, in terms of, like, if they were to have a ball competition, I think Tipperary would win most years against most teams. Obviously, that's not how it's done. But it's a triumph of athleticism, game plan, and obviously there's lots of skill there too, don't get me wrong. And, there's been a bit of Limerick supporters taking a fit of the vapours anytime you say anything against their team these days. You're trying to analyse it and look at the ups and the downs. I mean, Tipperary obviously got close to them for long spells for a reason. Athleticism is not the reason alone that Tipperary got close to them. Game plan alone, it's certainly not. So, I mean, is that something that you noted as well, that the skill set started to break down a little bit, and that's what you need to do against Limerick?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like a Limerick player throwing up a ball from a standing position, and I think the ball hit the heel of the hurl. That's the way he connected with it. Just ruffled. They don't actually think they have as much time on the ball as they do, because previous sequences of play, there's been lads breathing down their throat, and then all of a sudden you start rushing things. I think, as you mentioned earlier, one of the big differences is just, the ability to call on a Conor Boylan who, will bulldoze through and win a free and work a goal when it looked like his touch was after letting him down. He salvaged that situation. David Reedy came on and got a score as well. And obviously, Cottle O'Neill got 2 points before he went off with a sprained ankle as well. Just that ability, I suppose, to inject fresh energy and for it to be probably raise the gear rather than even trying to maintain the level that they're at or things dropping off. Tipperary probably didn't have that. And when you bring up that absentee list, I think, people probably do get a bit of a fit of vapours about it as well. But just imagine having Paddy to call on for 10 or 15 minutes when the game is in the melting pot, having that calm and influence. Brendan's obviously retired, but he'd be unbelievable to have him for even 20 to 25 minutes at the end, even if Callan was fit enough to come in and make an impact. If Jason Ford was fit enough to come in and make an impact. They were just really, really short of options yesterday. And while they may have fallen on their best 15 as a result of that. And I have to say, I thought Barry Hogan's puckouts were a big plus yesterday, and just the ability to go mid-range a lot of the time. A lot of them did go to hand, or they were able to hold on to possession there. I thought they looked a lot more comfortable from that aspect. But yeah, pluses for Tipp, probably some lessons for Limerick to learn, and any element of complacency has probably been brushed off them now, I'd say, as a result of this. They would have got a fairly rude awakening, and I'd say they would have got a fairly rude awakening in the changing room after.
Yeah, but I don't see where any complacency would be. I don't see that.
Just in the talk, Shane. I know the outside noise shouldn't be getting in, but like we were talking about potentially Tipperary getting massacred in the week coming into this game. You're talking about the biggest defeat that potentially that Limerick could ever put on Tipperary. I think the handicap was a Tipp 8. Like that's unheard of in a Munster Championship game. And I do think there could be an element of complacency, as in, like, Tipperary looked like they were just showing up yesterday, if you know what I mean. They weren't the ones that were setting the tempo intensity-wise, and they usually are. They're usually the ones that enforce their game plan, enforce their work ethic on the game. That wasn't the case yesterday. And maybe there's a possibility, and John Kiley referenced it maybe, that there was an element of the outside noise getting in. And that's one of the first times I would think potentially that's happened with Limerick. They're usually really good at keeping everything on the outside, and they're just ruthless efficiency. They still got the job done yesterday, but there was a lot of questions asked, and it took them a while, I'd say, to come up with the answers that they wanted.
Yeah. So after the game, I mean, the red card was a huge discussion point after the game.
The lack of a red card.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, for Aaron Gillane, he pulled across Ronan Maher. Obviously, it's been parsed to death at this stage, but it did a snap poll last night. There's 1,400 votes have got in so far. 61% of people believe it was a red card. Yellow card, 36.3%. And no card, 2.7%.
Those 2.7%, I tell you something, they'd be letting the game flow anyway.
Was that Eddie Kerr voting about a few hundred times there? He wants the manliness in the game. Grodogo Grakon says, do Limerick look beatable after an inexperienced Tipp team ran them close for 65 minutes? Richard Hogan, the Burns angle was interesting, Shane. Tom Morrissey's form must surely be a worry. Yes, Limerick did look tired. Tom Morrissey, 4 points from play better.
Yeah, Jesus, he was probably slow to get into the game, but I thought Morrissey and Hegarty, particularly when the game was there to be won, I thought there was no end to them in the last 10 or 15 minutes yesterday.
Look, Hegarty was exceptional, as he's been pretty much every game that I've seen him in this year. Just winning ball, catching puck outs, the chop up, the way he chops the ball up from the ground while he's on the move, the way he gets the hand down like it's a bucket coming off a telescopic. He just is, like, he tests you out physically at all times. So, by the way, get your comments in. Let us know if you do think that was a red card or if you don't, and more importantly, why you think that's the case. And we'll talk about your comments up here. There was plenty of talk actually about the depth of this Limerick panel. So I think something that puts it really sharply into focus is that 12 players scored for Limerick in yesterday's game. 6 scored for Tipperary. Another thing is, just down the stretch, Limerick scored 2 goals off the Tipperary puckouts. And the second one coming from Grode Hegarty getting the ball. Then he wasn't really targeted by anybody, and he was able to stand up and hit that lovely ball in for Aaron Gillane. So that was the case against Clare. 2 goals came from Tipperary puckouts. But I suppose this was late on in the game. Sorry,
from Limerick puckouts.
From Tipperary puckouts, Limerick won the ball and immediately delivered it back up the field to score a goal. That happened twice late on in the game, and it also is something that happened twice in the first half against Clare. Clare got both of their goals from it. So I think this is an area that you can always work on, the puckouts. And look, the team was tired, so I think that's part of it. But it just shows how good Limerick are in those situations.
It's funny you say that though, Shane, as well. I think Tipp were forced to go along, particularly in the last 15 or 20 minutes. I think Limerick made them. They just didn't give him that option of going short anymore, and they said, "Listen, if you're going to beat us, we're going to force you to put the ball along." And they kind of gobbled them up that last 10 or 15 minutes when Tipp bodies were starting to flag a small bit. It didn't look like Barry Hogan had any options to go short at all. They were pressed up really high, and they made them go and try and win that dirty ball, and they probably struggled when they really needed to win it in that last 10 or 15.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me to bring up in terms of what Barry Hogan is looking at. Now, this is the start of the game, and again, it's just one moment in time, so this doesn't mean the entire game set up like this. But I just thought, if you look at the way Tipperary set up, and the backs have red circles around their lower body, they're kind of just spread out in such a way that kind of makes them somewhat easy to defend. Now, they are all options for the ball, but you see Limerick with the hurleys up, spread out nicely. And the same with the forwards. The Tipperary forwards are kind of spread out in such a way that it actually feeds into a zonal setup for Limerick. So when Barry Hogan tries to hit a pocket of space, I don't really see a pocket of space for him to hit a runner into. Now, contrast this with what Nicky Quaid does for Mike Casey. Now, again, just a moment in time. This is 3 minutes into the game. Not every puck out was like this, of course. But he's able to hit a ball across to Mike Casey. Limerick do the right thing. They spread out. They make the pitch as wide as possible. Casey gets that ball, and there's any amount of places he can put it. But more importantly, there's any amount of places that Limerick players can run into up in the top end of the field. And one other thing I wanted to talk about was looking at, I think this again is the way that Limerick are setting up. So in the yellow circles there, that's all the Limerick players setting up for the puck out. A couple of the players at the far end of the field that didn't bother, there'd be just too many circles. But again, they're able to just spread out nicely. Those tip backs there, you can see around the 45 and around the edge of the D. If they get the ball, there's limited options because you've allowed Limerick, because your forward line hasn't folded into that sort of spine thing that Limerick do, when they come together like that, and then all of a sudden there's 30 yards either side of them. If you don't do anything like that, you allow them to set up zonally, you allow Dermot Burns to sit right half back, you allow Dan Morrissey to sit left half back, midfielders sit back, and you've got a beautiful zonal setup where no matter what Tipperary players run over and back, there's going to be kind of someone in that area. It'll take 3 or 4 seconds for the ball to travel. So, I mean, realistically, you're making it a little bit too easy for Limerick. And you see there in the half back line on the 45, if that ball goes to one of those two players that are either side of Aaron Gillane there,
Gobbled up,
you're straight into traffic. A trap is being set by Limerick here. They stand just far enough away so that you think, yeah, I give that ball, and then all of a sudden the defender is caught. And you know what? If you do give it to him, what's the defender going to do? He's going to turn around and be like, oh my God, I have to get rid of this ball. So Tipperary actually tried to run it out against Clare. But because it led to be honest, they hadn't repped it enough. They didn't really know how to do the support lines. They kind of abandoned that and they just hit it short. And Craig Morgan once or twice took on his man. He's brilliant at doing that. Ronan Maher just said, you know what, let's get snow on this. And funnily enough, once or twice Barry Hogan, they talk about Brian Hogan's range. He actually landed the ball almost on the 21 at one stage.
There's one ball nearly went wide was it in the first half? Yeah, one ball nearly went wide.
Yeah.
That ended up just nearly rolling across the line, yeah.
But this is going all the way back to 2017 when the puck out situation from Limerick was really hurting Tipperary. Remember that game? Michael Ryan was still over the team at that stage. And Limerick did that thing of folding in and, Nicky Quaid, his great puck out range, and he was able to put it into space. And Aaron Gillane or Graham Mulcahy and so on, they were able to just collect the ball as an inside forward in those pockets of space. And Tipperary don't do that. And it's such an easy win. You need variety. You need to overload one side. You need to, like you were saying with Jared Brown and Dermot Burns, you need to give them a headache. Like as a back, having played in the half back line plenty of times over the years, you don't want to see something different. You don't want to see 3 guys over at the far side all setting up under the one wing back because fair chance he's going to lose that ball. You just want to be able to sit in your positions. You don't want to be asked any questions. And from the puck out, was your view, did Tipp ask any questions or did they just, for the most part, just make it quite easy?
Yeah, they did not probably ask that many questions on the puck out. That was probably one area that Limerick got an awful lot of success. It was kind of engaging with them during normal play. I thought they were really good. And even there was a couple of times when Nicky Quaid put balls into areas, and in fairness to the Tipp lads, they were right on top of Limerick and they were getting the hurling and they were spoiling. And I thought Dylan Cork did it a couple of times in particular. I can remember in the first half. Just want to jump back for a second, Shane, just on the red card. Can you give me your own thoughts on that? I was there. It was wild. It was very, very loose. Partly kind of reminded me a bit of that time Paddy pulled that really loose one on Michael Rice. I think it was in 2012, and it didn't shoot up the hurl and damaged his finger. What was your view on it?
Yeah, look, I did think at the time, certainly I thought this is like I tweeted straight away. I was going to say that should be a red card, and then I tweeted that could be a red card. And I had plenty of people arguing with me saying no, it shouldn't be. And this notion of manliness in the game, I think it was loose, and I think he easily could have gone. And then that's 2 games in 2 years where Aaron Gillane could have gone against Tipperary. And people say, he pulled out and let go of the hurley and all that kind of stuff. But when you watch the footage back, you can see he has a look up and knows that Ronan Maher is there before he ever pulls in the first place. So I just thought it was unnecessary, and I think it probably should have been a red card. In general, I don't really like red cards that much, but it was so unnecessary, and there was a bit of force to it. You can say he just went in one hand, but yeah, what were your thoughts?
Just before that, actually, and he was given a yellow card just after. Darragh Donovan was given a yellow for a schnig. I think he gave the hand of the hurl to Jake Morris, and Sean Stack called Liam Gordon back and gave him a yellow kind of retrospectively. But listen, I'm kind of like you. I don't like seeing players getting sent off, and I think I want to see 15 on 15. Like if this was 15 or 20 years ago, that type of a stroke, it's maybe a yellow. It's definitely not a red. But hurling has changed. Like you're just not allowed to be that loose anymore. That's just the nature of it. Do I want it to be a red card? Do I want to see red cards? No, but a real wild kind of loose stroke like that is really, really on the borderline. And this is what I'm saying to you about even the lack of tip support there. Or you need to. You need to probably make a bit of noise, and it was probably an element of a bit of a hometown decision to it as well. Just because there's 25,000 Limerick lads kind of making noise coming in on top of Liam Gordon. That's where, it might sound a bit silly, but that's where your support comes into it as well. Create a little bit of a furore about it or whatever. But in the modern hurling, that is a red card. We've seen. Look, what about some of the red cards we saw in the league for probably a lot less than that? I don't necessarily agree with it, but the way hurling is refereed in the modern game, that is a red card.
Yeah, JPXST180S says, what about Craig Morgan? Any views, Michael and Shane? It was a bad slap down on Mulcahy. Cut him across the shin. I think that's quite different. We've 2 Terrys coming on the show today. Terry Hyland will be on talking football later, but with Terence and Sambo McNaughton on talking about the hurling. While we're talking about Tipperary against Limerick, Sambo, what were your thoughts? I suppose if we can just jump straight back to that red card incident. Did you think it was a red card back in your day? That wouldn't even be a free.
I hope you weren't going to ask me that question. But yeah, it wouldn't have even been a free in my day. But I agree with everybody. The modern game has changed. And when we were watching it ourselves, we were watching the pub, everybody said he's in trouble here. And like the rest, you definitely don't want to see anybody get a red card because it spoils the game. But going and some of the sentence off over the league and that there, you couldn't really argue about it. It was a loose pull. Maybe if he had a mid-connection with the ball, it might have changed the thing a bit. But in the modern game, it's just that's chances are a red card. But at the end of the day, it plays on the edge, but he wasn't marking Muller Teresa what you give out sometimes and that there, and that's the reality. Let's be honest about it, boys. He was getting frustrated. He was getting dragged and pulled. And would any of us have done anything different? Probably not.
Richard Hogan's is careless and he needs to cut that out of his game. But he and Hegarty need to be more careful with their discipline as the championship gets into the closing stages. Another point about Aaron Gillane, and I suppose this talk about trying to mark him from the front, that you shouldn't allow him in behind you, because he is brilliant at doing that catch in over the top. There are some players just have a knack for it and they're brilliant. But what I'd say is, if you go behind Aaron Gillane, and the way he likes to go right across the 6-yard box almost and move into that space where there could be 20, 30 yards in front of him, because Limerick draw out so far, you kind of have to match up with Tom Morrissey and Hegarty and try and mark them out the field so that you can maybe put a bit of squeeze in Limerick bringing the ball up. But the downside is there's huge space for Aaron Gillane to move into. And I was looking at it a few times when they had the camera from, high up above the goals. And you can see what Barrett is trying to do. He's trying to make sure that option isn't there in front, but at the same time that it's going to be a great ball that has to go in over the top. And sometimes you lose out. That's the thing of it. But you can't really allow him in front, but then you have to be clever enough to get back. Do you know what I thought? And I've done this with goalkeepers over the last few years, Sambo, is that I would tell the goalkeeper, stand 10 yards out from goal, maybe 12 yards out from goal in play. Obviously, once the ball gets closer in, obviously you just step back into goals. But just to get into his running lane, because he likes to go across the 6-yard box like that, maybe 10 yards out or whatever. I think that's the solution. Get into his line so he can't just move freely over and back. What are your thoughts on it? Because you have to do something. I mean, a defender is it's very difficult.
Yeah, but you're asking a lot of a goalkeeper there, Shane, aren't you? Like, your goalkeeper then, kind of like a Gaelic football thing, he has to nearly become as talented as any player out there, but I think you have to play him in front. You have to take that gamble, and it's a harder ball to go in over your head, and maybe you can get back and hold him up, but to give him that space in front where he runs onto and out there, like he's so good, he's so talented. Like, probably him and Owen Cody are the two best at it at the minute, and I just think, like, if they're coming from midfield or even deeper and they're putting balls in front of him, he's nearly impossible to mark. You have to play in front, and the goalkeeper, if one comes in over the head, the goalkeeper, definitely can take part, all right, but your goalkeeper has to be very, like, confident on it and out there, and it's an option for sure.
Yeah, might get you to maybe try taking off the headphones. There's a bit of or turn off the headphones, because there's a bit of feedback, so you'll have to turn them off because it's breaking up your voice a little bit. I'll just put you in the background just for a second there. Yeah, so what Joe will do, we'll play a clip of Noel McGrath and Colin Bonner, who spoke after the game in terms of, like, where to next. Obviously, Tipp have lost 3 from 3. Limerick have won 3 from 3. Cork is the only game left in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, well, look, we came down here to win, and we wanted to keep some kind of hopes alive in terms of the championship. We know now that that's gone beyond us. We're devastated over that because, as I said, we didn't want to be out of the championship. This wasn't on the plan, and we just had to go back to the drawing board. And yeah, we do have one championship game, and that's against Cork. And Cork, I suppose they've still something to play for. They have to play Waterford and they have to play Clare, I think so. But yeah, look, it's our last game, and we're going to have to, we want to finish on a high.
A lot of lads there with minor All-Irelands, 20 All-Irelands, 21 All-Irelands, senior All-Irelands. Like, it's not as if we're short of players in Tipp, or short of quality, or short of honesty of players. Like, they are there, and I see lads stepped in today. Some of their first starts, Ger Brown, Connor Staken, brilliant games there. Like, Ger Brown had 3 or 4 points in the first half, I'd say. Like, so there's bodies there, and I think we need to keep that going now over the next few weeks. Like, it's still Munster Championship. Like, who knows what's going to happen next weekend? Like, that's just the nature of sport. Like, this thing isn't fully finished yet for Tipp, so we'll get back in the training field this week. Like, we'll get the bodies right, and we'll go again, and whatever happens, we'll show up against Cork, and we'll put our body and soul into it again, and that's all we can do now at this stage, and learn what we can from today.
Yeah, Michael, what was he like after the game? Well, both Noel and Colin.
Noel was absolutely kind of crestfallen, but he was very kind of defiant as well. Whereas I thought, like, there is still a chance of Tipperary qualifying, regardless of how remote it is. They need Cork to beat Waterford next weekend. They need to beat Cork in their last game, and I think they need Clare to beat Waterford as well. But like, there's still a chance, and they need probably score difference to go with them. But I think Colin Bonner feels like the race is run, and Noel McGrath still thinks there's a chance, and you just hear him saying there about leaving the body and soul in it again. I just thought it was an interesting contrast. Usually it would be the manager who was, clinging on to any bit of hope he can get until the bitter end, whereas kind of Noel McGrath. I have to say about Noel as well, for a lad has Noel ever taken frees in championship before? Like, he's never started a championship game as a free taker, I'd say, before, for Tipperary in senior championship. I think he missed one long one yesterday, put over a lovely line ball, put over a lovely score from play, and was a real calm and influence throughout. He was brilliant yet again, and that was after being outstanding the first day against Waterford as well. But just interesting that he's going to fight till the bitter end, whereas Colin Bonner was devastated and kind of looked like, it did look like maybe that he feels their race is run now for this year.
Yeah, Sambo, you've been in that position many times as a manager where I suppose you've had tough results. Can you understand that? And then I suppose if to look at Limerick's point of view, do you see any weakness in how they're playing at the moment, or do you just think it's a case of they're getting up to speed?
No, well, to be fair, for the rest of the country, would probably hoping that Limerick would go there in one handy and catch them maybe in a knockout situation. But I wasn't surprised with Tipp. I couldn't get my head around granted, they've lost a lot of experienced guys not there, but
Sambo, there's an awful lot of interference on that. Do you have another device or something? There's just a lot of feedback. I'll just remove you off it at the moment.
Right.
It's just crackling so much. Yeah, so sorry about that. Hopefully we'll be able to get him back in a second.
Just Shane, just on Gillane, like, I suppose it's easy focus on, the potential red card. Like, he was brilliant again from playoff, limited supply yesterday. I suppose one of the key things, what you're saying about trying to play him from the front is there's no way Darragh O'Donovan should be able to stand up, look in and see where Gillane is for that goal. No way. And that takes out, like, it doesn't matter whether he's in front or behind. If the man is under pressure delivering in the ball, the quality of the ball going in is not going to be as good. Like, the trajectory on that ball was literally the second he strikes it, you're thinking, this is danger written all over it. And I know Dermot Burns was going for a point from his effort and it was short, but again, the trajectory was absolutely perfect. His timing was brilliant. And I suppose Barrett in general had been picking him up. Seamus Kennedy ended up under him with him for that high ball, and you're kind of thinking, physically Kennedy probably has a couple of inches height wise on him, but it doesn't matter. He just Gillane just timed it perfectly. He was actually unlucky with another one, I think, in the first half from a similar instance. I think Barrett actually did really, really well, kind of rolled back on top of him, but he got caught for that one in the second half. But again, a lot of that is to do with, as I said, the time the player has out the pitch. You should not be able to you should not have the time to look up and plan where you're going to deliver a ball. It should be a case of, I'm hitting the ball into an area and I generally know they're going to be there, but they just had a bit too much time in those couple instances, and those goals really, really hurt Tipp.
Yeah, no, they absolutely did. But I suppose the same thing was with Seamus Kennedy. He was trying to make sure that the ball in front wasn't there. You're kind of caught both ways. And when the ball is snapped maybe 8 yards out, it's a tough one. And again, for a keeper, I like the idea of a keeper standing 8-10 yards out to sort of, look, it's a risky game, a bit like in Gaelic football. The goalkeeper will come out the field, he'll get involved in kickouts, as in contesting the opposition kickouts. The odd day it will go wrong, but how many scores will it save you in every other game that people won't talk about? But if it was any other sport, you'd be moneyballing this thing to the last. It's kind of like when you're on fourth down in American football and people say, 4th and 1, should you go for it? Well, you'll turn over the ball if you don't get that yard. But the stats show over the last 20 years, if you go for a 4th and 1 and try and run it over that line to get your first down again, the stats show that 68% of the time you will get it. So you'll be like, okay, that's worth it. In hurling, obviously, it's more of a fluid game and it's not as easy to measure these things. But I just think over the course of games, especially if you have a goalkeeper who's comfortable doing it, you can get a lot of, you can definitely get a bit of joy out of that.
Just on the notion of, not wanting to give him that space in front. Like, I think it's the lesser of two evils to give him a yard in front rather than get lost behind you and put yourself in that position. Like, but Kennedy probably lost him on the high ball. Barrett lost him on the high ball as well. Yeah, you don't want him to be 3 or 4 yards out in front with a ball in hand, but it's still probably the lesser of two evils compared to, it's not a goal opportunity if he gets the ball on the 21, shall we say, whereas there were 2 goals yesterday when those balls went in. So maybe it's the lesser of two evils, just to hedge your bets. Sean Finn was talking about this during the week, actually, just sometimes about marking marquee forwards and how his mentality has changed. And that sometimes he had to learn that he didn't like conceding a point, would say, to Patrick Horgan or Shane Kingston, but that he had to learn that, okay, I need to cut my losses here, concede the point and move on, rather than overcommitting and potentially conceding a goal that could change a game.
Yeah, absolutely. Another point to make is just these purple patches that Limerick go on. In the Cork and Waterford games, they had runs of 10 points to 2 against Cork. That was from the 39th minute to the 60th. Against Waterford, from the 50th minute to the 62nd, they went on an 8 points to 1 run. And then late on in this game, 2-5 to 1 point. They went on a scoring surge at one stage. It's just kind of what they do. It's kind of like Kilkenny in their heyday under Brian Cody in the noughties. They're just able to find this time where you can't keep with them. They go on a scoring burst and the game is kind of done. Now, it was a lot later in the game here, but it's just what they do and a sign of a very strong team.
And just for the chasing pack, how worrying is it that Limerick still hit that 30-point marker despite, being under pressure for an hour or so yesterday? I think it was 225 against Cork, that's 31. They hit their 30 point against Waterford, and then they get up to 30 again, having been probably outmatched, outfought, and maybe even outtaught for the guts of an hour. They're still able to come with that burst that you say. And there's probably there's probably a bit of muscle memory in opposition teams as well, because they know that burst is coming also. And mentally, even that can take some energy away from you, because you know what's coming in that last 15 or 20 minutes. The charge that Limerick are going to come with. Physically that they're not going to drop off. So I do think probably the resemblances with the great Kilkenny team are becoming more and more. Kilkenny were always able to grind teams out. Like the 2009 All-Ireland final is a classic example. Tipp out-hurled Kilkenny for the vast majority of that game. Then twice, in the blink of two eyes, shall we say, the game is over. And Limerick have that similar ability now as well.
Yeah, and this Michael Breen goal chance in the first half was a huge opportunity. 26th minute, it was Tipperary 10 points, 1-6 to Limerick at this stage. And it's easy to say it from here, but it was a great burst through from Barry Heffernan, fed the ball to Breen. And just this moment here where Nash gets in, I suppose, gets a lot of pressure in on Breen, and it ends up being a tame shot. I just wonder, as he is the hurley cocked and now Nash is committed. I mean, this is something that I suppose some of the more lethal forwards, they do. The sort of feint and then turn inside and go straight at the goalkeeper. Now, he would have been engaged probably by Mike Casey quite quickly, but then you're looking at a player being inside the penalty area, going 100 miles an hour a goal. So easy say it from here, but I just wonder, and then there was one in the second half, a ball broke inside the Limerick square, and Michael Breen got hurley to it, and it ended up just going wide. So between that and some of the crazy wides that Tipperary had in the first half, both teams had lots of wides. So in the first half, Tipperary scored 14 of 26 chances. Limerick scored 10 of 25. In the second half, Limerick put away 14 of 19. Interestingly, Tipp had more chances in the second half, but some of those were like there was three goal shots in a row in injury time, so that would count as 3 scoring attempts there. But again, it was that situation from maybe the 51st minute to the 70th minute where it was just a complete takeover. We're going to try and bring Sambo back in again. Sambo, how are you?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. There's a big old delay, but hopefully it comes right there.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can definitely hear you.
Right, that's all right. It's crackling bad here with me at the minute, but I don't know. Maybe the Glens is bad signals or something.
Yeah. Look, we wanted to bring you on to talk a little bit about hurling and the development of hurling. We'll come back to Limerick and Tipp in a while, but just while we have the signal, okay, can you talk to us about where you think the development of hurling is at in Ulster and Antrim? Because it's something that's been kind of troubling you lately.
Yeah, well, Shane, to be honest, it's very much in the case that everything changes and everything stays the same. Like if you take 30, 40 years ago, when I first came on out there, like you have the Lease, Westmeath, Kerry, Antrim, Down, we haven't changed. We're as far away as we've always been in them counties, and and I can't really speak for other counties, my own, what the problem is, but I've always thought that we went about it the wrong way. If you take Ulster in general, we haven't progressed anything. It's the same old story. You take Derry, if you use the name McKeever and Downies and you change it to McGuigan and McCaig, everything stays the same. Like, we haven't progressed anything, and we keep wasting money. If you take Antrim has probably spent somewhere in the region of concessions of 30 to 40 million in the past 30 years promoting hurling, and we're as far away now as we've ever been. And And I know that the biggest wonders in the GA is Ulster hurling people, and I'm probably top of the list. But I'll probably keep at it to the put me in the grave. But you need to a two-tier approach for it, not there. And like, I'll explain it very quick if you allow me. Like, we have an under-20 management this year as good as any in the country. Aaron Graff and Paddy Shivers, two good young lads, done all the work, put all the time in out there, and then the young lads are just not at the pace of the game. Like, we don't need anybody to come up and do coaching sessions, and like Martin Fogarty come up and with all great people, and they didn't tell us we were holding a hurdle wrong or anything. Like, we're doing the same drills, we're doing the same thing. It's just the pace of the game's a problem. Like, I'd Liam Sheedy beside me along the line for 18 months or whatever. He didn't bring us all into a room one night and turn down the lights and tell us this is the secret how to win an All Ireland. You know, like I said 30 years ago, Antrim needs to buy a house in Tipperary, one of them big stately homes, or somewhere in the Midlands, turn it into a hostel, put 3 pitches at it, and go head hunting a Derek McGrath or Tommy Dunn or Dalo or somebody, and organise our development squads to be playing the Waterfords, the Corks, all year long. And so when a kid gets to 30 age, under 20 years of age, with 30 games behind him, 40 games behind him, at that pace, it's the pace of the game. It's asking it. A young fella, if he plays hurling, said, for argument's sake, at 50 mile an hour for 8, 9, 10 years, and then you ask him to go at 100 mile an hour, he's having to make decisions under pressure a lot faster, and that's the problem. And until we change that, we're not going to change anything. We're wasting our time. Like the whole of Ulster is like we're a football province, and we keep banging our head against the wall. And Ulster hurling people keep gurning, and like Donegal will say a couple of encouraging words at the end of the Sunday game. Sir Fard was saying that years ago. I've been saying what Neil McManus is saying now. Like we need to think outside the box and buy a bus company and have buses and allow us to go down and have a home in Munster, say, where you take your development squads 3 or 4 times a year. Every development squad's going down there, and you head somebody. You don't go and advertise a job. You go look on your man and you give him an offer he can't refuse. It comes down to him. He sits in that, and you give him the power, the structures, and look at that there, and you control hurling. Ulster people must start controlling hurling. Like I was asked on Sunday that for my views in the Ulster hurling final. No, what we do with the Ulster hurling final, and yeah, I would do the Ulster hurling final, but it's important what time of the year it's played at. The last Ulster hurling final I was manager, I had to phone 3 guys, James McCaig and Sean Delargy, hadn't heard from them in 3 years, to come and do sub. The own young lad, I brought him with me. They were the 3 subs. We won the Ulster title. It was played in the same day of the Munster hurling final. There was literally 2 man and a dog at it. Nobody wanted to be there. We wanted to watch the Munster final. It has to do between Big and the Nicky Rackett or the Joe McDonough, whatever we're in, or else it becomes a waste of time. You know, there's all them things like, but like, what's to stop us hurting people owning a bus company and keeping the expense down? And if we had bought a house in one of them stately homes down south somewhere and turned it into our centre of excellence down there, where we're bringing in the best coach, we're bringing in teams every week. Yes, that's what needs done, Shane. Like Belfast, I've got skin in the game for Belfast. I'm the guy that went to, and this is not blowing smoke up my thing. I'm not looking at a job. I'm done. I'm finished. I understand that, but I love the game of Python. I went to Grove Park, and Porrick Duffy asked him if I come back with a plan, will you support it? And he said yes. I went and got Sean McGuinness, God rest him, Colin McFall, all good Belfast men. We sat, we made a plan, and all of a sudden, the chairman was there, he was letting us go. Then all of a sudden, this other committee appeared, working on a plan for Belfast. So we said, well, Mickey, myself, Woody, Sean McGuinness, and Colin McFall, today we played Cork and Ballycastle. And the first thing we said is, who are you? They want to know who we were. The guy used to call it, like, and it's madness. And then we spent 3 weeks organising. Belfast broke up into districts like the Thurles Oak effect, because the clubs are not doing the work. I have never seen Belfast hurling from minor down in a worse state than it is today. And 30 years, we have gone back rather than progressed. Belfast hurling, as we speak at the minute, has been since I was 14 years of age. I'm involved with the under 16 development squad. We played Dublin there. We have 3 Belfast men along with me. I'm the only North Antrim one and a South West fellow, and they picked the team. And there wasn't one child from Belfast in contention for a place. When I was young, North Antrim used to play South Antrim in challenge games, and they're always good games. You wouldn't dream of doing that now. So, like, somebody has to be honest and speak up. Like, the Gaelfast thing hasn't worked. There was good people involved, and I know they're trying hard. I know their pockets in Belfast. There's good work hard, but Belfast hurling at the minute it's the lowest I've ever seen in my lifetime, and I don't know who's going to replace the Neil McManuses of this world and not when they go and out there. Like, we have a supporters club say it's as good as any in Ireland. We have a good management at senior level. Everything's good. The players are well looked after. But I feel the roof house of foundations. I think Antrim hurling, if the science is there, I'm fearful that where we're going to be in 10, 15 years if something's not done now. And somebody needs to think outside the box. And there's no point sending coaches up to show us a couple of new something, because like we know how to coach. Like there's good coaches in Antrim, maybe not the quantity there is in other counties, but there's good coaches we were doing. But it's this of the game is the problem. And on to you can take kids and get them to the pace of the game. And I always use this example, and I know it sounds like a stock record. The minor team that I was over, me and Woody were over, that Limerick beat us by a point, and then the following year, Joe Canning's mine beat us by 2 points. He had 12, Tipp twice, Wexford, Waterford, and we had the kids up to the pace of the game. Like, nobody's, and until we do that and do it right, we're going nowhere. And as I say, 30 years, Kerry haven't improved, Laois haven't improved, Westmeath haven't improved. The only example that you have that pack at the top table is Dublin. Everybody else, I was rolling around a square with PG Cuddy 30 years ago, trying to beat Laois, and they were trying to beat us, and nothing's changed. We haven't progressed, and that's my egg box moment.
Yeah. It's breaking up a little bit. I'd like to talk about this a little bit more, but unfortunately it's breaking up a little bit, Sambo. So we might leave it there and come back to it again in the very near future. It's unfortunate that the connection isn't perfect. Okay, so great to have Samuel McNaughton on there.
So much passion there, Shane.
Yeah,
so much passion and frustration. And it was a big thing that I'm getting from Sambo is that, that the same things are happening over and over again, and he just wants something to happen outside. He wants some sort of outside the box thinking. What he says about the stately home is an interesting one, and the busloads of owning a bus company and sending buses down, but they do need to. It's a very, very valid point, and I've always said geography is very difficult with Antrim. If you're not playing that level of practice games, if you're not working to the level that you're going to need to be at in championship, there's no way you're going to be at the level. No way you're going to be at the level that you want to be at. And even just the simple thing he said there about operating at 50 miles per hour the whole time, and you're comfortable within that. But if you're brought up, it's like No, it's like Limerick and Tipp yesterday. Limerick are comfortable at a level. They were taken out of their comfort zone yesterday and they were brought up a couple of notches and they struggled for an hour to get to those levels. Now, they eventually did. But if you're playing with should we say, a weaker county, maybe like Antrim or my own Offaly or Laois or anybody like that, it's just difficult. But then you're kind of caught between two stools as well. I'd love to see Offaly playing at those high levels in, Division 1 or Liam McCarthy. But if you're getting beaten 20 or 30 points in all your league games, it's kind of tricky. I think Sambo's more talking about your preparatory work, shall we say, all your challenge games, helping get you up to that level. But I definitely would agree that something outside the box needs to be done. It's not just a matter of sending somebody up to take a few coaching sessions or something like that. That's putting a plaster on something and it's not going to work long term at all. It probably won't even work short term.
Yeah, in terms of just not having it ad hoc, sure, organise your own challenge matches there. If there was something for teams to build towards to come down and play, blitzes over a weekend or, a certain amount of challenge matches or training camps, that kind of stuff. Yeah, how realistic it is, like you said, by dint of geography, it does make things very difficult. And then, there's probably a nice proportion of people that neck of the woods that have no interest in GA in the first place, and that's never going to change either. So there's definitely obstacles there. Like, it's a fair trek to get up to Sambo's neck of the woods. But look, great to have him on, and as people have been saying, speaking with such passion, and that's as pure as the driven snow. We'll talk about the ring record and Maher Cups. There was no Joe McDonough this weekend, but Wicklow 310, Kildare 525. So heavy enough victory there for Kildare. They have 4 wins from 4 and have booked their place in the final. Obviously, they would have been favoured throughout the year. Mayo 223, Sligo 120. So Mayo hurlers getting their way and have McHale Park available. I mean, that was a huge frustration of theirs, as we talked about on the Thursday show.
Big time, yeah. I think they played Derry next time out in what's like a de facto semi-final. So I'm sure they're absolutely delighted to have McHale Park available. And listen, we've seen it sometimes, like, you just have to make a bit of a stand and cause a bit of a hullabaloo to get, not even to get what you want, to get what you deserve. Good man Flash Wicklow are really struggling without me and Manny Moore. I couldn't even get game time when I was there. It could have been Christy Ring and I wouldn't have been playing. But that's for another day. And Derry had a good win against London as well, 3-14 to 1-14. Kildare have their 2 feet in the final, really, and they're awaiting the winners of that Mayo and Derry game. Just in the Nicky Racker Cup then, big win for Roscommon, beat last year's finalist Tyrone, 324 to 21 points. Huge win for Donegal as well. 33 points to Warwickshire's 10 points, and a good win for Armagh, 318 to Fermanagh's 219. We wouldn't talk much about Fermanagh, but in fairness, they won the Laurie Mar last year and have been really competitive at record level, which is probably a bit surprising because it's difficult when you go up a tier. And lastly, in the Laurie Mar Cup, it was Monaghan 116, Longford 215. Strange scenario here, Shane. Monaghan had won their first 3 games, but they've had two of those games will count as losses now because they played an ineligible player. So they had 1 foot in the final before that decision was made. They were beaten at the weekend. So now they have 3 losses and only 2 points, and they're totally out of it. And in the other games, Louth 226, Cavan 1-8, really comprehensive win there. And Lancashire were well beaten by Leitrim. Leitrim 220, Lancashire 1-8. And the big story of the weekend, you should have had maybe your Leash jersey on, or maybe I should have switched on it at half time. Offaly had a great win over Dublin in the minors. As I was saying to you on last Thursday show, there was a good bit of hype and talk about this Offaly team, but they really, really delivered. Dublin were probably the better team for the first maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then we took over. Dan Ravenhill, very, very good. Adam Screeney, brilliant. You know what you were saying there about Michael Breen potentially selling the dummy inside? Adam Screeney did that a couple of times yesterday. And he's only a small, kind of diminutive player, but really fast, really silky. He picked up a bit of an ankle injury at the end, which is a bit of a worry, but I believe he's okay. And that has set up the most novel of Leinster minor finals, the first time ever. Because Laois beat Kilkenny 115 to 15 points. So it's Offaly and Laois. I think it's on a Monday night. I think it's this day week, actually, which is peculiar to say the least. But this is the first time they've ever met in the Leinster minor final. And I believe it's only the 3rd time in history that Kilkenny or Dublin haven't been involved in a Leinster minor final. So it's brilliant. Like, I know, like, Offaly's absolutely humming at the moment. We do under-20 footballers last year. We've the minor footballers in the semi-final, and now we have the minor hurlers in the Leinster final with, like, you know, a really realistic chance of winning silver. I think they beat Laois by 3 points already this year when they played them. So yeah, there'll be a lot of focus on that final. It's great. I don't think Laois were in a Leinster minor final maybe about 15 years ago. Haven't won it, I think, since like 1964. So this is it's going to be a lot of talk about this. A good old fashioned Midlands derby.
Yeah, and as our colleague Jason Byrne from the Irish Sun wrote, I mean, your pride levels are right up here at the moment. Offaly and pride, anytime you get a win, it comes bursting out of you.
The proud amateur, yeah. I think he was comparing myself and Pat Nolan from the Mirror. I think I got a good few brownie points in the proud amateur over the weekend, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, a great performance from this Offaly team. And they are fairly... I was actually wondering, is Adam Screeney related to the under-20 captain, Jack Screeney?
Yeah, I think they're brothers, to the best of my knowledge. I think they're brothers. Yeah, I'm not 100% on that. But Kilcormac have been very strong. They are very strong at underage level. And that I think there's 6 or 7 on the squad, and they won the Division 2 Féile 3 years ago and were well good enough to play Division 1 and potentially win that. So there's been an awful lot of time put to them. The likes of Shane Hand and that have put an awful lot of time into them, and it's bearing fruit at the moment, yeah. And as I said to you, like, Leo O'Connor, who brought Limerick to an All-Ireland minor final. I think it was Kyle Hayes' year. They were beaten by Tipperary, I think, in could be 2016. I can't remember. But he's come in and he's really brought the levels really high. And it'd be great if we could top this off with a provincial win. We haven't won the Leinster minor since 2000, I think, and we got an awful lot of fruits off that team, like Rory Hannafy, Joe Brady, Michael Cordial, and many more. So, yeah, really looking forward to that game. Should be a belter.
Yeah, and I'm sure Dublin are frustrated. There's 4 or 5 of their lads at the start of the year opted for football, so that makes it tough for them. By the way, Clare beat Tipperary in the Camogie, 1-11 to 10 points. The under-20 Leinster final is on tonight, Wexford against Kilkenny. That should be good. And the Munster minor hurling final is on Wednesday, Clare against Tipperary. We're going to talk football now with Terry Hyland, former Cavan and Leitrim manager. Terry, how are you?
Very good, and you lads?
We're not too bad. Obviously, some great fixtures, plenty of semi-finals over the weekend. We'll start off with Donegal against Cavan, 2-16 to 16 points. I watched this game, and I suppose the big thing was Cavan were excellent for long spells. James Smith was causing havoc. Paddy Lynch was causing havoc. But down the stretch, Donegal just pulled away. A couple of high balls into the square late on, doing pretty much the damage. 2 goals came off that.
Well, probably 2 mistakes, yeah, but brought them back into it. But to be fair to Cavan, that'd be very competitive up to that point. I think Donegal had come to grips with Cavan's defensive setup at that stage. Our 2 half-backs were starting to inject a lot of pace in the attacks coming forward through, and it was kind of cutting holes in the Cavan defence. And I know the 2 goals from 2 high balls probably were the decisive factors in it, but I think they hadn't come to grips with Donegal at that stage.
Yeah, and like when you came away from it, like, do you come away from this thinking opportunity missed for Cavan, or do you think, fair enough, over the hour, we didn't quite get it done late on? Because I think it was 2-2 to a point in the latter stages that Donegal took over with.
Well, look, I suppose again it goes back to the Division 1 experience. I was against Cavan, been playing in Division 4, and it was a scenario where we've seen it in the Kerry game, where the experience and that little bit of more physical and mental toughness come into it. And, the Donegal got the first goal with 10 minutes to go in normal time, and there was 5 or 6 minutes on top of that. So, I think Donegal probably were going to grind out the result, but I was asked this question on Saturday, and I did say that Donegal don't close the door on other teams, which is dangerous for them. And I think this is where the opportunity was in it for Cavan.
Yeah,
Terry, just a point on that, Cavan dropping as far down as they did, by all evidence that we've seen in Championship over the last probably about 18 months since that Ulster final win, and even yesterday, like, Cavan are an awful lot better than a Division 3 side. I was chatting to Stephen King, who was the captain when they won in 97, and he said, I'm not disillusioned. I don't think we're a Division 1 team, but I think we're a good mid-table Division 2 team. Do you think they're, like, that Ulster title aside, like, are they underperforming for the talent they have available to them, shall we say?
Well, look, Mickey has always said that Cavan, in his opinion, is all about championship. And to be fair, his record stands up in that he got to two Ulster finals, winning one of them. He got beaten by probably the eventual winners in the other games. Like if we look at Armagh, for example, Armagh went for the league and to survive in Division 1, right? And unless you have massive talent or massive pool of players behind you, it's very hard to go for the both competitions. And this is what happened. Cavan probably, the league wasn't overtaxing on them. Perhaps it was what caught them in the last 10 minutes because of the condition. We've seen it with Cork as well, who performed very, very well for 60 minutes. And then Kerry kind of took over at that stage. And maybe that's that physical edge that you don't get playing in the lower leagues. I don't think it's necessarily down to talent. I think it's more down to that physical edge that you get from playing those tough Division 1 games.
How difficult is that balancing act, Terry? Say when you were with Leitrim, with due respect, would you have been looking at the league maybe more than championship because it's a more realistic competition for you? So it's a difficult kind of balancing act for a manager.
Well, to be honest with you, that's what it was. When I was at Cavan, we were the same. When I went in with Cavan, we were Division 3 and we got up to Division 1, which we felt was going to be a better platform for them. Look, the teams that are performing well in the league and can hold on in the championship are big population-based counties, and that's just the facts of it. And they have the backup as you know. You get a county with, say, like Mayo, we talk, for example, and they're one of the teams that's probably going over, but, you know, they all talk about the 26th behind the 26th. The Leitrim's of this world and even the county, they don't have that resources there to do that.
Yeah. And so, just Terry, then to talk about the Tailteann Cup, which is going to kick off later in the month, and this is something for the likes of Leitrim as well, who obviously lost to Galway. Mickey Graham was asked about this, that would he have a strong hand to deal with for the remainder of the summer? Because, you know, there's always the thought that players might, you know, do something else with their summer. And he said, no, the boys we have are committed to the Cavan jersey. They aren't in this for the championship and for the big days. They've had a lot of dark days and still keep coming back. No doubt the players will fully buy into it. The boys have been resilient and deserve serious credit for the last number of years for relegations and people writing them off. So do you see Cavan having a full hand for the Tailteann Cup? And in any way, shape or form, do you look at it and think, geez, this is something we can win and it's a good thing to target?
Well, I think they can. They can win. Okay, Cavan traditionally didn't lose that many players to the States or going to way to play for the Summerham. You know, Leitrim traditionally lose a lot of players like that, unfortunately, because Leitrim's biggest exporters are people, and everybody has a brother or a sister or a first cousin in this New York or Boston or Chicago, and there's, you know what I mean, there's somebody waiting with a ticket to bring them out. Cavan is not too bad in that fact, and a lot of the lads, you know, are probably in good employment and they're reasonably well established. The younger fellas are well, I don't know where all the younger fellas are now related, but they're not that many students playing with them anymore. So there's not that many lads looking for J1s going to move away. I think Cavan will be fairly strong in the Tailteann Cup, and I think they will treat it with the respect that it is deserving to get.
And is it a competition that you know, looking back as a supporter of them at this stage, would you be fired up for it, or do you think many people will even go and watch these games?
It will all depend on how the GA markets it. And to be honest with you, to date, I don't think they've made a very good job of it. I think that the idea and the initiative is good. You know, if we balance out all Ireland wins with counties, probably you count them in one hand as 175 or 80% of all Ireland. So what is there for everybody else? And this is what we have to put something else in. A competition, a proper competition. We've seen it with club. If you go back to the club championship, and it become very, very marketable, and yet our intermediates and juniors weren't being involved in it. And like there is an intermediate winner in every county and there's junior in every county. Now they're involved in it. And again, as Eddie said, every team that wins a particular competition, it means something to them. It means something to their parish. If it's a club thing, it means something to their county if it's a county competition. And I think that if it's marketed properly, it needs to be marketed the same as we call the All-Ireland. Whether the All-Ireland is the right name for it or not is another question.
Terry, did they only get one shot at this, like with the Tailteann Cup? If it's not a big success this year and it's not promoted properly, like, is it dead in the water somewhat? Like, usually with most things, you hit the ground running, there's a big hullabaloo about it, and then you can coast off that and build on it over the next couple of years. But it's a bit worrying that a competition is starting at the end of this month. And apart from, you know, a few maybe journalists tweeting about the teams that are going to be involved, you know, I haven't heard anything. It's just people urging the GA to promote it, but there's no sign of it being promoted, shall we say.
Well, that is the fact of it. And this is where okay, it's probably not its full format this year because we're coming out of COVID and it's going into a different type of competition. I think it needs to be beefed up. I think it needs to become like a mini league. I think if players are trained for 5 or 6 months at inter-county level, you need to give them football, because at the end of the day, you're trained to play football. You don't train for your physique or anything else. It's to play the sport that you're involved in. So let's give them games. The year will probably end up being probably knockout competition. Maybe they need to bring it into a league format where the like of the Leithrams and the Carlos and all these guys, I get them 2 and 3 games per year extra on top of a knockout championship, if you want to call it that.
You're giving them something to stay for, basically, and something that they can really get engaged in.
Correct. And you can bring on, again, panelists. You get 1 or 2 chances in the championship in the tough games. If you're playing an Ulster championship, you always have to put the best foot forward. So a young fella coming in gets it very hard to get a game time because management are under pressure to win. So what does he look at? He says, "Oh, I go with experience all the time because I have to win the game, because I've no other outlet for these lads if we lose the game."
Terry, when you look at Donegal and their performance so far, they beat Armagh pretty well, 116 to 12 points. A lot of people were tipping Armagh to win that game. Obviously saw it out against Cavan ultimately. Where do you think Donegal are at? Because obviously their aspirations are Ulster title and All-Ireland title.
Yeah, well, look, Donegal 4 years ago looked like a top 4 team. I think they have slipped. I don't know for what reason. Like, I was looking at some of the players yesterday. You take Thompson, who was taken off. Like, he was liking the stage 4 years ago. Young Morgan played very well yesterday. They have a few from other fellas coming in. I think Michael Murphy is probably coming to the end of his tether. I think Donegal are at a decision-making stage of regard where they are with their squad. As far as they're playing at the moment, I think Donegal probably could struggle to win an Ulster title, to be honest with you. I think that Derry and Monaghan probably are coming in maybe a little bit better on the other side. I think Donegal just don't close that back door, that they allow teams to get at them, and the better teams will get at them.
Yeah, Michael?
Yeah, no, 100%, and I would agree with Terry on that. Donegal just do leave that door open for they leave teams in games maybe that they shouldn't be in. I thought there was somewhat a bit of irony in that yesterday they got the 2 goals from maybe long speculative balls in, and that was where Cavan got their goal in that 2020 final. So I don't know if there was some sort of revenge in that. Just Terry, a quick question for you before we go into the Leitrim game. How do you find being outside the inter-county bubble now? Can you just talk to me about how demanding being an inter-county manager is? You have a stint obviously with Cavan and then a stint with Leitrim as well. How full on is that when you're a manager of an inter-county team?
Well, it is. Well, we run our own family business, which means that we're on site all the time. For me personally, it's got to do with the lads I have around me. It's got to do with the selectors and the trainers and the management group, because they would shoulder an awful lot of responsibility in any of the managements I've been involved in, let it be in Cavan, let it be Leitrim, and you know what I mean. As I always say, we act as a cooperative, and I might be the manager of the cooperative, but it's very much what everybody in the group does, and their decisions and opinions is very much respected from that. So, they would have taken a lot of the load off and spread the load around. Only for that, I couldn't be involved with inter-county football because the time element is absolutely crazy. I'll be straight with you. If I was probably 25 or 26, I was starting out to run my own business in my late 20s. If I was an inter-county footballer, I would have had a choice. Either I run my own business or become an inter-county footballer. I could become both. And I suppose there's a little bit with management. When I got into management, it was the same. But the only difference is we probably went in with a business model in that with all the people that was involved, they all had roles, they all had responsibilities, and they took that on board.
Just when you talk about some of the crazy demands, Terry, like how many phone calls a day are we talking here? And like, you're responding to email. Jim Gavin used to respond to emails at 2 or 3 in the morning. I think he was a bit of a night owl, or that was the time when he got a lot of things done. Like, and just give me examples even of some of these crazy demands. People don't see it; they just see you standing on the sideline on a weekend and say, "Oh, he's taking training on Tuesday and Friday." But just talk me through some of those demands exactly.
Well, when you talk about crazy phone calls, you know what I mean? I always learned a long time ago when I'm involved in football 30 years ago, don't bring the phone up to the bedroom with you, because at the start of the night, somebody could ring you at 4 o'clock in the morning with somebody else's phone. I remember one evening went home, and this was only the mobile, and I just went through the mobile, and I counted 95 between text messages and phone calls. Now, they weren't all football related and they were business related, but it was 95 calls or texts dealt with on the phone, on that one phone that day, and possibly another 30, 35 on landline. So you give you an indication, if you only put 3 minutes to every one of them phone calls or every one of them messages, you give an idea of the amount of time that can be consumed in it, you know what I mean? So I would say probably 50 of them are football related, certainly on the mobile. So that's 150 minutes. That's during your day without talking about going to training sessions, without setting up video sessions, without anything else. It's probably, and I've probably been conservative, but I'm being realist. And I mean, I read about this 35-hour and 39-hour training sessions for players. To me, that's a little bit over the top. Probably 25 hours on your normal working week, I would say, is what it is for me.
If you could go back, would you do it all over again?
I think it's one of those things it's in your blood, I suppose. You know, it's like playing. Nobody ever wants to finish playing. Like, I remember playing my last football match at 47 and I got taken off and I was kind of ticked with everybody being taken off. So, you know, it's just what is in there. Like last Friday evening, I was sitting at home and it was a good evening and I said, what am I doing sitting here? And I tipped over to the club was training and just to kill an hour. But it's just that you're into that, I suppose, and that's it. And you don't know any different.
Were you on the club scene last year, or have you been on the club scene at all, Terry, or doing any sessions or involved with anyone? Or
not this year, no. I took a complete break out of it. Like, it's 30 years since I got involved in management at club level, first between management and senior in the county and underage and all of that. This is only my third year not doing anything in 30 years. So, to be fair to my wife and my family, I decided we'll take a clean break this year. That doesn't mean I won't go back next year.
No, it sounds like you could be re-energized to go back next year, to be honest with you.
Terry, what did you make of, going into it, did you assume that Galway would win and win comfortably? It was 420-9 for a finish against Leitrim. So is that along the lines of what you expected?
Unfortunately, yes. And, you know, it's easy for me to say it now because I'm on this side of the line and I'm not really involved. I think it's tough on the Leatrams and the Sligos in Connacht and the Carlows and the teams like that in Leinster. I think it's very tough to mentally prepare players to win those kind of games because, as I said before, these young men are very well educated. They're not stupid. They know what they're going out against. They're going out to give a performance. They're proud to wear their jersey. They're proud to represent their families and their clubs, and they want to go out and play with pride. But at the end of the day, they're realists and they know that, as it was, if a Leitrim goes and can get within 5 or 6 points of a Mayo or a Galway, it's a hell of a game for them. Unfortunately, it swings the other ways. I think there was a 1 point difference. I think last year's headline was Mayo, another hammering or whatever it was from Mayo, and it was similar, yes. In fact, there was only 1 point of difference between 2 games this time and last year. It goes back to the unfairness, I think, of the competition. And I said this from day one: was the All-Ireland ever fair? It probably wasn't. You know what I mean? I would have a drastic rethinking on the way the All Irelands are run. I think it should be run on a league format. I think there should be your gain is your promotion in the league as regards your All Ireland. You go back to the Tailteann Cup. I think that the winners of the Tailteann Cup should be guaranteed within the All Ireland until, we say, provincial final stage of that All Ireland competition. Whatever way that they bring them in, that they go straight in the back door, at least to get another game in there, and then they can go back. And there has to be reward for what they're doing, and they need to address that and dress it up in a format that it's appealing to the players. And to me, this is not what is happening. And you know, it's going to be the same next year. It's going to be the same the year after. It ain't going to change. Leitrim don't have the population base. No matter really what to do with them, they look at their underage. They can improve that. They could maybe win underage competitions in their province, but all is going to be coming up against an AO or a Galway. But look, let's be straight about it, 10 times the population of Leitrim.
Yeah, and then I suppose Pádraig Joyce was saying afterwards about facing into Roscommon in the final of Connacht, and he goes, "We're ready for action. We know it's going to be tough. They've beaten us twice already this year. We won the 2 games last year, so there's nothing between the 2 teams. Roscommon are playing a much better brand of football than they used to over the years. They're minding the ball really well. They've got a lot of potent inside forwards. That's something we have to nullify ourselves and get scores ourselves at the other end. It's going to be a fascinating game, and it's a challenge we're looking forward to." Now, I watched Roscommon beat Galway in the Division 2 League final. I thought they were impressive at times, Now, Galway mounted a huge second half comeback there, but Roscommon eventually saw it out. How do you see that game going, Terry? I know we're a bit out from the game just yet.
It's funny, before there was a ball kicked in Connacht, I tipped Roscommon to win, and have straight. Yeah? I feel that they've got a few extra forwards. I think that they are moving very well. You go back to that league final that you talked about, it probably was the best game of the weekend. It was played at a championship pace. It was very competitive. Now, in the end of the day, there was only a point in it or whatever was in. It was very small margins in the end. It will be a very, very interesting game, but I do think that Roscommon have a slight edge on them at the minute. And that's, I know the league game probably didn't matter because Galway were promoted at that stage, and it mattered more maybe to Roscommon because they needed to get the points out of it. But I just think that Roscommon have just a slight edge on them at the minute.
Do you agree when he says that they play a better brand of football than they used to?
Managers will always say things, I suppose, to either get under somebody's skin a little bit or question what they were doing before, allowed to go back and say, what's he talking about? We always played this way. I wouldn't pass any remarks on that type of thing. I think that maybe the forward division is a little bit more potent than it was, and maybe that's what he's alluding to.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier the Munster semi-final between Kerry and Cork. 23 points to Kerry, 11 for Cork at Páirc Uí Rinn. Do you what were your thoughts on Cork pushing for this game to be at Páirc Uí Rinn? Now, I would hate to think that people use it as a stick to beat Cork with. Fine, they lost the game. They gave a very good performance for long spells, ran out of gas maybe the last 25 minutes or so. Did you agree with them pushing to have that game at home in Páirc Uí Rinn?
Well, look, it's a home game. I suppose at the end of the day, you're entitled to have your first round at home. Don't get me wrong, it comes down to money, and as always, as Munster Council is losing out because of revenue, and the pitches are the same, and I'm sure Kerry didn't mind playing on where it's been played. In the end of the day, as I used to always tell players, in the end of the day, the pitch is only the stage you have to go to perform on. It wasn't going to, okay, people say they might create a siege mentality for Cork and all this, that and the other. Kerry, I'm sure, one bit worried whether it was in Páirc Uí Chaoimh or whether it was in Killarney or where it was. They'll go on to perform and play wherever they're playing. I'd say the whole ruck was all over these things and pitches and home pitches, no different than Cavan and playing up and that. So it's down to revenue at the end of the day. The pitches are all good pitches. You know what I mean? You have to go out and perform no matter where you are.
Yeah, are you a believer in this Kerry team in terms of winning an All-Ireland this year? The notion is that it's the most open All-Ireland for a decade, and maybe Dublin have come back a little bit. But are you a big believer in this Kerry team?
I think so. I think they've been building towards that for the last couple of years. I suppose the big point towards it was the weekend was the bench they could bring on. You know what I mean? You seen when they were seemed to be in a little bit of trouble, but it was only minor trouble at the same time. They had more and like Guinea, you know what I mean? There's an awful lot of experience in the game. Yeah, you know what I mean? And that's that. You know what I mean? That was the turning point. Like I do feel Cork as a county are underperforming. You know what I mean? From a football point of view, the massive player pool. They should be Division 1 team every day, all day long, and they should be fit to compete with the bigger boys all the time. I think whether it's a political problem they have down there, whatever it is, I think they should have the talent.
The under-20 semi-finals run at the weekend. I'll just give the results here. Tyrone 114, Kerry 112. Rory Canavan was excellent there, and Kildare beat Sligo 12 points to 7, a game that I saw. The talk has been basically about the venue, which is Breffni Park, which obviously you know very well. On Sunday evening, Tyrone tweeted that the decider would take place at Breffni Park. No official confirmation, I don't think, of that just yet. But the Kildare camp and Emmett Bolton, who's a selector there, was coming out saying that he expects that it should be in Croke Park. And Morgan O'Callaghan, who's been involved with Kildare over the years, he tweeted this just a little bit earlier today. The one thing that I haven't seen much mention of in all this debate about the venue for the under-20 All-Ireland final is that the pitch in Breffni Park is in poor enough condition. Grass is sparse in a lot of areas, and surely players deserve a good surface for a final. Do you think that's a fair comment, Terry, about the pitch?
The pitch probably has got a lot of wear and tear in the last 12 months because, you know what I mean, our facilities are in Cavan that we're looking at to improve them. We have a polo grounds project. We're hoping to build 3 new pitches. That hasn't started as yet. It has gotten a little bit more aware maybe than some other inter-county pitches again. I suppose again it comes back down to finances. You come back down to if Kildare can say to Croke Park, we'll bring 30,000 people to it, it'll be in Croke Park. It's as simple as that. And you know what I mean? If it's a 10,000, 12,000 people going to a game, it's going to be at a provincial ground. They are looking at the logistics. It's probably 50-50 for Kildare to Tyrone to travel. Kingspan Breffni has hosted a lot of those All-Ireland 21 matches before, semi-finals and finals, and it's quite capable of doing that. So I don't think the pitch is an issue. I'll be straight with you. I can't say I'm a little bit better on one side, but the surface is good. It's actually only a surface that was laid 3 years ago. So it's not as if it's a bumpy, humpy surface, you know what I mean? So I can't see that as an argument. Again, it's lads just playing a little bit of politics and trying to pull it into a Leinster venue, probably than an Ulster venue. That's the stuff. So.
Yeah, and it seems like a nice kind of midway point for both counties, but I suppose it is what it is. Just to ask you a final question then, Terry, in terms of the overall Ireland pecking order, and I know you mentioned that Kerry, obviously you do believe in where they're going, but do you see them as number one? Who's your favourite for the All-Ireland overall?
I would still go with Kerry as being the number one, to be honest with you. I think they just have that strength and depth. They showed it in the National League. People say the league doesn't really make that big, but it does count. They were quite comfortable in all the games in the National League. I think that they have the forward power, wanting to get into Croke Park, to open up teams. We've seen what they did to Mayo in that league final. Look, I think they're 10% ahead of everybody else, and that's a fair stretch, to be honest with you. I think the county level at the minute. Now, we've seen last year, everybody said the same, and Tyrone come along and pipped them. Maybe there will come somebody at the pack. I don't know.
Okay. Well, look, brilliant to have you on the show, Terry. Appreciate it, and hopefully we'll chat to you again soon.
I'll have to find that old number they charged you when I was 47 next time I come back on you.
Good man. Wear it the next time, Terry.
Thanks very much, Terry. Chat to you soon.
Thanks a minute.
Okay, great to have Terry on there. Just a couple of other fixtures that we have to touch on before we finish up here. Wanted to talk about the ladies' football. Round 2, Meath beating Dublin. I mean, they've done it again.
Yeah, 1-8 to 10 points. I think Emma Duggan again got the all-important goal. But when you go back to beating them in the league and beating them in last year's All-Ireland final, that's 3 in a row now. And you'd imagine, I don't know, maybe there's a small bit of psychological damage done there after last year's All-Ireland final. Dublin will obviously look at, when do we probably really want to beat them? We want to beat them when they can't play us again in a knockout game, be it an All-Ireland semi-final or final. But you'd have to say, from Meath's point of view, after what was deemed a surprise All-Ireland win, backing it up with a league title, now beating the Dubs again and beating them during the league stages as well, they have definitely backed it up. And I know there's some concerns whether Vicky Wall will be involved next year if she goes down under to play AFLW. So they'll definitely be trying to make hay while they have everyone available to them. And in fairness, they've definitely backed up their All-Ireland final so far. The big thing that was on everyone's lips was that there's going to be a reaction from Dublin. Were they going for 5 in a row last year, 4 or 5 in a row last year? All of a sudden that's finished, and they haven't maybe reacted as well as you would have expected them to.
Yeah, I wonder how much having players down at the AFL for a few months at a time is affecting them. I mean, you'd think, it should be fine. And this idea that, look, they've been training, professionally there for the last number of months, they'll come back and they'll be flying it. But there could be a lot of wear and tear too, players coming back after a heavy season over there, and all of a sudden they're supposed to hit the ground running. And tactically, how do they fit in? And, does everything gel nicely? It must be difficult enough juggling act for McBowen.
I thought Eamon Murray's comments before the league final were fascinating. He had a right go at the AFLW and just didn't see any skill in the game at all. And it was funny just to hear Vicky Wall tweeted after a picture of her and Eamon Murray and just said, "We're still friends" or whatever, even though he had a right cut at the game. And he definitely gave Sinead Goldrick plenty of motivation anyway, because he basically said that anybody that comes back from the AFLW, they don't come back the same player and they're not able to have the same impact on the games. Even what you're saying there about wear and tear, I think Arlo Dwyer is not playing with Tipperary this year because she's getting some surgery done. I don't know if it's her shoulder or not. I know she always wears that shoulder strapping on the back of her exploits in the AFLW. So, that's a difficult one. We're going to see more and more that you're not going to be able to juggle the two of them. I would say, I think, is next year's season starting a bit later and going a bit longer. There's going to become a sticking point there now where if you're going, and I know Peter Leahy said this a couple of years ago, they basically said in Mayo that if you're going playing there, you can't play with Mayo. But it doesn't look like it's even going to be logistically possible going forward. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, a couple of final fixtures to touch on. The Ulster Minor Football Championship round 2, Tyrone 3-17, Antrim 5 points. Derry 2-11, Donegal 1-9, Cavan 18 points, Fermanagh 3-6, and Monaghan 5-13 down 12. Coming up this week, Leinster minor football, Kildare, Wicklow, Dublin, Offaly. Hey, we have to touch on our goats of the week, and I have mine to hand straight away, so I'm going to call them out. Somebody that Jack O'Connor name checked on the Cork side of things. I thought Cathal O'Mahony was really good and got a couple of brilliant points for them. And I'd have to say, I thought that Aaron Gillane was, the most decisive player in the Tipp Limerick game, so I'd give him man of the match there.
Well, you've really caught me on the hop here because we haven't done the goat in a while. I'd probably give it to Adam Screeney, the Offaly Miners. I think he ended up with, I think he ended
Your
up
pride
with
levels.
I'm surprised you didn't give it to someone from Tipp and you're wearing the Gansey today. I'd probably to give it to him on a hurling side of things, on a football side of things. Yeah, probably give it to one of the Cork lads. I'm a big Sean Powter fan. I just think he's the absolute heartbeat of that Cork team. If they can keep him fit over the next couple of years, they'll always have a chance. Thought he was brilliant over the weekend. Another busy weekend, and this weekend wasn't too busy. Next weekend is going to be going gung ho again.
Oh, stop the lights, stall the digger. Okay, that's it from the show today. A reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame and you get 15% off. That's the height of it for the show today. We'll see you on Thursday, patreon.com/OurGame. Only place to get it. Michael, thanks very much.
Cheers, Shane.